A frantic little girl, tears streaming down her face, runs towards a garbage collector, urgently pointing back at her house. Within minutes, police cars flood the scene, sealing off the entire street. What this terrified young girl reveals to the garbage collector would transform his typical morning route into an absolute nightmare, exposing secrets that had been buried far too deep for far too long. Before we get started, drop a comment below to let us know where you're watching from, and if you enjoy these stories, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. On this particular morning, Marcus Taylor was navigating his garbage truck through the tranquil, suburban lanes, the early sun casting long shadows across the neatly trimmed lawns and well-kept homes. It was 8:20 a.m., and he was running about 35 minutes late, a deviation from his usually punctual schedule, caused by his partner's unexpected illness and the absence of a substitute. As he drove the bulky truck alone, Marcus reminisced about his 2 years on the job. His movements were smooth and practiced, a testament to his proficiency, honed by countless mornings on these familiar routes. The neighborhood of Brightwood lay before him, its immaculate facade contrasting sharply with his functional vehicle. Marcus took great pride in his role, fully aware of the crucial part he played in maintaining the community's cleanliness and order. He knew each street, every turn, and even the routines of numerous residents along his path. However, today's delay was particularly irritating, gnawing at his professional pride. Approaching the next stop, Marcus noticed Rachel and her daughter Lucy exiting their car and heading towards their home. He had become quite familiar with the two after years of daily interaction and garbage collection. Typically, he would share a friendly exchange with the locals, a simple act that added a touch of pleasure to his workday and fostered community spirit. Today, however, the atmosphere was different. As he called out a cheerful "good morning," the response he got was curt and strained. Lucy avoided eye contact, and Rachel offered only a tense acknowledgement. This lack of their usual warmth and cordiality left Marcus feeling uneasy as he replaced their neighbor's bin. Though troubled by their behavior, he reminded himself that everyone has off days, and it was best not to take it personally. Maybe they were just rushing to handle some urgent matter or dealing with private issues. He tried to convince himself to not read too much into it as he moved on to collect their trash, maintaining his professionalism while still being friendly and accessible. As Marcus lifted their bin, he noticed it felt unusually heavy. Attributing this to his disrupted morning and the odd interaction, he continued with his task. However, as he operated the mechanical arm of his truck, he spotted something alarming: a loosely tied trash bag that revealed its contents: brand new children's clothes, a full school uniform, a backpack, unused school supplies, and unopened toys. This unexpected sight halted Marcus. His usual detachment wavered as he pondered the situation. His schedule was already off, and he normally kept to strict professional boundaries regarding the residents' discarded items. Yet, seeing perfectly good new items thrown away bothered him, especially when he thought of the needy children in a nearby slum who could benefit from them. Torn between his duties and his conscience, Marcus eventually made a decision. He paused the mechanical arm, retrieved the bag from the bin, and, despite his delay, decided to approach Rachel's door, a significant deviation from his typical routine. As he walked up the driveway, bag in hand, he planned his words carefully, aiming not to intrude or discomfort Rachel, but to suggest donation options. Persistence paid off when, after a couple of knocks, the door opened to reveal a visibly distressed Rachel, her appearance even more disheveled than earlier. With a gentle and apologetic tone, Marcus began, "Mrs. Harper, I'm sorry to disturb you, but I couldn't ignore these items in your trash," he said, holding up the bag with its contents slightly visible. "I don't intend to invade your privacy, but the bag was loosely tied, and I noticed the items. I thought perhaps you weren't aware of the donation centers nearby where these could really help others." Rachel's response was sharply hostile, her eyes narrowing as her tone became cutting. "It was no mistake," she snapped back. "What I decide to discard is none of your concern. How dare you sift through our trash?" Taken aback by her anger, Marcus tried to offer further explanation. "I apologize if it seemed like I overstepped. I only meant to," but Rachel interrupted him abruptly. "If you're so keen on them, take them and leave us alone." Her voice quivered slightly, blending anger with perhaps a hint of fear. Just as Rachel started to close the door, a loud crash from inside the house, the sound of breaking glass, made both Marcus and Rachel flinch. They both peered inside, and for a brief moment Marcus saw a flicker of fear cross Rachel's face before she slammed the door shut. Standing there, stunned by the events, Marcus's initial unease morphed into deep concern. Clearly something was amiss, but what could he possibly do? He lingered, torn over whether to contact the authorities. The ensuing silence from within the house only added to his uncertainty. Eventually, Marcus returned to his truck, his thoughts swirling with doubt. He felt uneasy about discarding the brand-new items, so he placed the rescued bag inside the cab instead of tossing it in the back. As he climbed into the driver's seat and started the engine, the unresolved tension nagged at him. He drove off to the next house, his professional obligations clashing with his personal instincts. He couldn't help but glance back at Rachel's house in his rearview mirror, wondering if there was more he should have done, more he could have said, or if he could have offered more help. The weight of the items he'd saved seemed to grow heavier with each passing moment, serving as a tangible reminder of the moral dilemma he faced. As he continued on his route, the morning felt far from ordinary. Despite his efforts to focus on the familiar tasks of his job, lifting bins, operating the truck's mechanical arms, returning empty containers, his mind was haunted by his encounter with Rachel. As Marcus approached a house a few doors down from Rachel's, the rhythmic barking of a neighbor's dog added a background layer of noise. He lifted another bin, his actions automatic, yet his thoughts kept drifting back to the morning's unsettling events. The weight of the bin, the odor of the trash, the hum of the truck's engine, all these familiar sensations felt different today, tainted by his concerns and confusion. Suddenly, a small figure darted out from between two parked cars. Before Marcus could fully grasp what was happening, Lucy appeared and clung to his leg. Startled, he struggled to balance the large trash bin while a child wrapped around his lower body. Carefully setting down the bin, his heart pounded from the shock. He paused the truck's mechanical arms and removed his work gloves, then crouched to Lucy's level. Seeing her up close, dressed in a pristine blue floral dress as if ready for an outing, yet with a face marred by tears and a form shaking with distress, Marcus's professional facade softened. He carefully checked her for any visible injuries, finding none despite her evident upset. "Please help," Lucy pleaded, her voice cutting through the morning stillness, her small hand trembling as she pointed towards her house. "What's wrong, Lucy?" Marcus asked, his voice gentle but firm, trying to sound reassuring. "Are you hurt? Where's your mom?" But Lucy's distress only deepened at Marcus's questions. Her tears muddled her responses, leaving him struggling to piece together the situation while attempting to comfort the clearly terrified child. He began leading her back towards her house, hoping to find Rachel and uncover what was causing such fear. However, Lucy resisted, pulling back against Marcus's gentle coaxing. Her palpable fear only intensified Marcus's concerns about what could have transpired in the brief time since he had left their home. As they walked, Marcus tried once more to engage Lucy. "It's okay, sweetie. You're safe. Can you tell me what happened? Did something scare you?" Lucy's reply was fragmented, a mix of hiccups and sobs, her words barely intelligible. "Dad. Mom. Scared," she managed to say. A chill ran down Marcus's spine as the pieces started to come together. The new clothes in the trash, Rachel's disheveled appearance, the sound of breaking glass, and now Lucy's terror. Clearly, something was very wrong inside that house. They were halfway back to Lucy's home when Marcus heard a door slam. He looked up to see a man emerging from the house, his stride purposeful and aggressive. Instinctively, Marcus positioned himself between the approaching figure and Lucy, his protective instincts flaring despite not fully understanding the situation. As the man drew closer, Marcus noted his tall frame, dressed in an expensive custom suit, which starkly contrasted Marcus's work uniform. The man's face was twisted with anger, his eyes locked on Lucy hiding behind Marcus. "What are you doing with my daughter?" he bellowed, his tone accusatory and filled with barely contained rage. Lucy's grip on Marcus's leg tightened, her small body trembling against him. Trying to keep the situation calm, Marcus replied evenly, "Sir, your daughter approached me. She seems very upset. I was just trying to help." But the man cut him off, his demeanor shifting from threatening to condescending as he eyed Marcus's garbage collector uniform. "Help? What could someone like you possibly do to help?" The father's prejudice was clear in his words. "You have no business interfering with my family. Know your place, garbage man," he sneered, each word dripping with disdain. "I suppose picking up trash is all someone with your limited intelligence could manage. Did you even finish high school, or were you too busy getting into trouble?" Marcus felt his jaw clench, stung by the man's harsh words. He had encountered prejudice before, but rarely this blatant and cruel. He was acutely aware of Lucy still clinging to him, her small hands gripping his uniform. The father's tirade escalated. "I should call your employer right now, or better yet, the police. How dare a black criminal like you touch my daughter? Stop sticking your nose in other people's family matters." Internally, Marcus wrestled with how to respond. Every instinct screamed at him to defend himself, to shout back at the man and his unfounded accusations. But he was acutely aware of how his reaction could be perceived. Lucy was still with him, and if he lost his temper or attempted a physical confrontation, it would only make the situation worse. Despite the father's provocative behavior, Marcus forced himself to remain calm. He recognized that any aggressive response would only reinforce racist stereotypes and potentially exacerbate the situation for Lucy. Taking a deep breath to center himself, Marcus started again, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside him. "Sir, I understand you're upset, but your daughter came to me asking for help. I'm just trying to make sure she's okay." The father scoffed. "She doesn't need help from the likes of you. Lucy, come here now." He reached out to grab Lucy's arm, but she shrank back, pressing herself closer to Marcus. Torn, Marcus knew he had no legal right to keep Lucy from her father, but his instincts told him something was deeply wrong. With heavy reluctance, he crouched down to meet her eyes, his voice laden with regret. "Lucy, I'm sorry. I can't protect you. I have a job to do, and your father is right. I don't have any authority here." The words tasted bitter, each one breaking his heart a little more. "You should go home with your dad, okay?" Lucy looked up at him, her eyes wide with fear and betrayal, as the father reached for her again and shoved her forward to walk back into the house. Suddenly, she broke free and ran back towards Marcus, who was about to climb into his truck cab. "Please," Lucy cried out, her voice filled with desperation, "don't make me go back. I'd rather die than go home with him. My dad is bad." Marcus froze, his hand on the truck door. The stark declaration from such a young child sent a chill down his spine. Realizing his initial instincts were correct, that no child should ever feel so desperate and afraid of their own parent, he knew he couldn't just walk away. The red flags were now undeniable, and Marcus understood that the situation was far more serious than he had first thought. As he stood there with Lucy clinging to him and her father glaring menacingly, Marcus knew his next actions would be crucial. Whatever the consequences, whatever the risk to his job, he couldn't abandon this child who had placed her trust in him. But right now, helping Lucy is the most important thing. His declaration brought a small smile to Lucy's tear-streaked face, offering her a sliver of comfort in the turmoil. "I'll make sure she feels safe," Marcus added, his tone firm, reflecting his unwavering commitment to protect her. The senior officer nodded in approval, understanding the unique bond that had formed so quickly under such dire circumstances. With that, the police convoy, accompanied by Marcus's garbage truck, set off towards the grandmother's house. As they travelled, the streets seemed eerily quiet, the usual morning bustle subdued by the gravity of the situation unfolding in their community. Lucy sat quietly in the back of a patrol car, her small frame dwarfed by the seat, her eyes occasionally meeting Marcus's through the rearview mirror of the police car ahead. Upon arriving at the grandmother's house, the officers approached cautiously, not knowing what to expect. Marcus parked his truck nearby and followed closely behind, his presence a reassuring constant for Lucy. The officers knocked, and after a tense moment, the door was opened by an elderly woman, her expression anxious but relieved to see the police. Lucy rushed to her grandmother, embracing her tightly. The grandmother's eyes filled with tears as she looked over Lucy's shoulder at Marcus, mouthing a silent thank you to him. She had been worried sick after a troubling phone call earlier from Rachel hinting at trouble, and seeing Lucy safe was a weight lifted from her heart. The officers quickly briefed the grandmother on the situation, and she confirmed her own fears about her son-in-law's dangerous behavior. "He's been a problem since the divorce proceedings started," she explained, her voice shaky. "I never imagined he'd go this far." Marcus, standing slightly apart, listened intently, his mind racing with the implications of what had been happening to Lucy and her mother. The officers continued their protocol, securing the house and ensuring the grandmother was informed about the steps they would take to find and apprehend Lucy's father. As the situation at the grandmother's house stabilized, Marcus knew he had to return to his route. His truck, filled with uncollected trash, was a reminder of the job he'd left unfinished. Yet, his thoughts lingered on Lucy and her family. The connection he'd made today transcended the usual boundaries of his workday interactions, and he felt a profound sense of responsibility for their well-being. Before leaving, Marcus knelt down to Lucy's level, his eyes gentle but serious. "Lucy, you're incredibly brave. Remember, I'm just a phone call away if you ever need me again." "Okay." Lucy nodded, her small hand squeezing his for a moment, her gratitude evident even in her young eyes. With a heavy heart, Marcus returned to his truck, his mind occupied with thoughts of Lucy, her mother, and the ordeal they were enduring. As he restarted his route, the normalcy of his job felt different now. Each stop, each bin he emptied, carried a reminder of the morning's events. His role as a garbage collector had unexpectedly cast him as a guardian in a young girl's life, a role he accepted with a newfound respect for the impact he could make beyond just keeping the streets clean. The police continued their search for Rachel and her husband, their efforts intensified by the urgency Marcus's call had brought. For Marcus, the day ended with a mix of emotions: pride in his actions, concern for Lucy and her family, and a deepened understanding of the community he served. He knew that tomorrow, and many days after, he would keep an eye on Lucy's house, ready to step in again if ever the need arose. His job was more than just collecting trash. It was about watching over those who might one day need just that, someone to care enough to stop and help. "But can you tell us exactly what happened? We need to ensure your safety and take appropriate measures against those responsible." Rachel took a deep breath, her gaze shifting between Lucy and the comforting presence of her mother, gathering the strength to recount the ordeal. As Rachel began to speak, her voice trembled slightly. "It started this morning. He came home drunk again, and when I told him I wanted a divorce, He lost it. He hit me and threatened to take Lucy if I ever tried to leave him. Her words were punctuated by quiet sobs, her ordeal evident in every tremor of her voice. Lucy tightened her grip on her mother, her small face buried against Rachel's side, seeking comfort in her proximity. Marcus watched, his heart heavy with empathy for the family, yet his mind raced with anxiety about his own future. Officer Johnson nodded solemnly, taking notes. "We've got multiple reports and evidence from the scene. We'll make sure he faces charges for his actions today, and we'll be applying for a restraining order to keep him away from you and Lucy," he assured her. The grandmother, still clutching Rachel's hand, whispered words of support, her eyes wet with tears but also filled with a fierce determination to protect her family. As the formalities continued, Marcus found himself increasingly out of place yet unable to leave, deeply invested in the well-being of the family he had fought so hard to help. The community, which had gathered around, slowly dispersed as the police took control of the situation, leaving Marcus with a profound sense of having changed the lives of those involved. As the police wrapped up their immediate investigations and prepared to take Rachel's husband to the station, Marcus approached Officer Johnson. "Officer, I know I interfered today, and I'm not sure what that means for me," he started, his voice filled with concern. Officer Johnson looked at Marcus, his expression serious yet kind. "You did what you thought was right, and you protected a child and her mother from immediate harm. It's rare to see that kind of bravery. We'll handle it from here, but you should talk to your employer. Explain the situation. If they have any sense, they'll understand and support your actions." Marcus nodded, the weight of the officer's words settling on him. He turned to Rachel and Lucy, who were now being comforted by the grandmother. "If you need anything at all, I'm just a call away," he said, his tone earnest. Rachel looked up at him, her eyes reflecting a mix of gratitude and newfound strength. "Thank you, Marcus. You saved us today. We won't forget that." With a final reassuring nod from Officer Johnson, Marcus walked back to his truck, his steps slow, his mind busy processing the day's events. He knew his actions might have repercussions on his job, but the relief and gratitude in Rachel's eyes provided a solace that no job could offer. As he drove away, the street quieting down and the police cars disappearing into the distance, Marcus felt a renewed sense of purpose. Whatever the future held, he had made a significant difference today. His route would continue tomorrow, but for now, he knew he had done something far more important than collecting garbage. He had collected trust and respect from those he had helped, and that was worth every risk he had taken. At the audacity of Dennis's lies, her hands tightening around Lucy, who clung to her side. The little girl's eyes were wide with fear. Her earlier trauma echoed in the quiver of her lip as she listened to her father's loud denials. Marcus felt a surge of protectiveness. He stepped closer, his presence a silent pillar of support for Rachel and Lucy. He couldn't believe the nerve of Dennis, twisting the truth so blatantly. Rachel whispered to Marcus, her voice a mix of anger and disbelief. "He's lying. He's always lying. He wants to make me look bad, to make himself the victim." Her resolve hardened as she spoke, a determined glint appearing in her eyes. Officer Johnson returned to the porch after dealing with Dennis, his expression serious. "I've heard what he said, but we've got your statement and the evidence. His claims won't hold up against the facts," he reassured Rachel. He then turned to Marcus. "Thank you for your intervention today. You've not only helped keep Rachel and Lucy safe, but you've also given us the opportunity to finally deal with Dennis properly. Your actions today were crucial." Marcus nodded, his gaze drifting towards the street where Dennis was being led to a police cruiser. His thoughts were a tumult of relief and worry, relief that he had been able to help, and worry about any further repercussions. Yet, Seeing the tangible difference he had made in Rachel and Lucy's lives fortified his resolve. The grandmother, who had been quietly observing the conversation, finally spoke up. "I can't thank you enough, Marcus. You've done more for us today than you can imagine." She hugged him briefly, her embrace warm and grateful. As the scene settled down, the police officers began to clear the area, ensuring that Dennis was securely taken away. Marcus watched as the cruiser drove off, a part of him relieved to see Dennis contained, but another part bracing for the next steps. Rachel, gathering her strength, stood up. "We need to follow through with this. We can't let him get away with what he's done, not just to me but to Lucy." Her voice was firm, her earlier fragility replaced by a steely determination. Lucy, still somewhat shaken, looked up at Marcus. "Will you stay with us a little longer?" she asked, her small voice hopeful. Marcus looked at Rachel, who nodded in agreement. "Of course I'll stay," Marcus replied, settling back down on the porch. "I'll be here as long as you need me." The afternoon waned into evening, the once chaotic scene now calm, with only the occasional whisper of leaves in the gentle breeze. Officer Johnson and his team promised to be in touch with updates and additional support. As they departed, the street returned to its suburban tranquility, a stark contrast to the morning's turmoil. Rachel, Lucy, and Marcus spent the rest of the evening discussing practical matters, legal steps, securing a permanent restraining order, and ensuring their home was safe. Marcus was deeply involved, not just as a witness, but as a friend who had become an integral part of their ordeal. As the sun set, casting long shadows over the porch, Marcus felt a profound connection to the small family. Despite the day's harrowing events, there was a sense of hope and renewal. Whatever the future held, he was ready to face it, knowing he had made a significant difference in the lives of those he had helped. The challenges ahead seemed daunting, but with the solidarity and courage they had shown today, Marcus was confident they would overcome them together. Though she kept her silence, a surge of anger rose within Marcus at Dennis's blatant audacity. He stepped forward, addressing the officer. "Sir, if I may, I can offer testimony as a witness. I've seen Mr. Harper's racist behavior towards both myself and the extreme fear Lucy harbors towards him. Additionally, there's something else," he disclosed regarding the new items he had salvaged from the trash earlier that day. "Mrs. Harper, is it true that your husband brought those new items, like the school uniform and backpack for Lucy?" Rachel, her eyes widening with realization, nodded in confirmation. "Yes, it's true. Dennis did bring all those new items. He planned to enroll Lucy in a new school, one I had no knowledge of." Detective Johnson's eyebrows rose upon hearing this new information. "Mr. Taylor, Marcus Taylor," Marcus introduced himself, "your testimony is vital for this case. We'll need you at the station to make a formal statement." At that moment, another officer joined them on the porch. "We've administered a breathalyzer test on Mr. Harper. He's well above the legal limit." The detective nodded somberly. "That settles it. We're booking him on multiple charges: driving under the influence, domestic abuse, violating a restraining order, and attempted kidnapping." As the officer departed to complete the arrest, Detective Johnson turned back to Rachel and Lucy. "Mrs. Harper, we'll need you and Lucy at the station to provide your statements. Is there someone to accompany you?" Rachel's mother stepped forward. "I'll go with them, of course." The detective nodded approvingly, then addressed Marcus. "Mr. Taylor, we appreciate your involvement today. Your actions may well have saved 2 lives. However, I understand you were on duty. You should probably contact your employer to explain the situation." As the group prepared to leave for the police station, Marcus felt a whirlwind of emotions: relief that Rachel and Lucy were safe, pride for doing the right thing, but also anxiety about the implications for his job and future. Following the police cars in his garbage truck towards an uncertain future, Marcus knew that, Regardless of the consequences, he'd make the same choice again in a heartbeat. At the police station, activity buzzed as officers processed Dennis's arrest, and a detective finalized statements from Rachel, Lucy, and Marcus. The fluorescent lights starkly contrasted with the quiet suburban streets where Marcus's day had begun, a stark reminder of the day's drastic changes. Rachel, holding an ice pack to her face, and Lucy, curled up next to her, sat with Eleanor nearby, offering comfort and worried glances. Standing a bit apart in his work uniform among the police officers and detectives, Marcus felt slightly out of place. As they awaited the finalization, Rachel motioned for Marcus to come closer. Her voice, soft but filled with gratitude, broke through. "Marcus, I don't know how to start thanking you. You risked your job to help us, and I'm sorry you got caught up in our family crisis." Marcus shook his head, smiling slightly. "Please don't apologize. I'm just glad you both are safe now. That's what matters most." Tears welled up in Rachel's eyes. "Still, you didn't have to get involved." "Most people wouldn't have," Marcus responded, his tone lightening. "I've been taking your trash for 2 years, but only today did I see you like this. I couldn't just walk away." A faint smile crossed Rachel's bruised face. "It's not a coincidence you were a bit late today, is it?" Marcus chuckled softly. "You noticed?" "Yes, and I was alone without a partner for the first time." Their conversation was briefly interrupted as a detective approached, handing them documents to sign their statements. As they signed, Rachel looked back at Marcus. "When this is all over, I'd like to thank you properly. Maybe dinner." Surprised by the offer, Marcus nodded. "I'd like that. And please, don't hesitate to call if you need anything, though." He added with a self-deprecating smile, "I hope you never need my help again. It would probably mean dire circumstances." The mood lightened momentarily with laughter from Rachel, a small respite in an otherwise heavy situation. "No, Marcus, we all need each other," Rachel said as the officer thanked them for their cooperation. As Marcus's phone buzzed with his employer's call, he took a deep breath before answering, ready to face any consequences of his actions today.